PBX. It's a great fit for especially an SMB environment. A lot of home users, of course, enjoy using Asterisk, and that's one of the things that people actually seem to get most excited about, and I'm sure Sean will agree, during our live or instructor-led training courses. We start to get into the capabilities of Asterisk, what you can do with it, the hybrid functionality, all the protocols that it supports, all the codecs it supports. People get excited, not for what they're there to learn as far as its business applications, but how they can use it at home to spoof their caller ID and prank their friends and mess with telemarketers, and that's when people really start asking questions and getting involved, and I think that's very amusing. And I, of course, use Asterisk on my own box at home for the same reason. So I've got caller ID based rules, so if my boss calls, it goes to voicemail, and a lot of people have what they call ex-girlfriend rules for the same reason, caller ID matches and other conditional clauses so that they get sent to the appropriate place. But again, it's a good fit for the SMB environment, and that's I think where we see, or I anecdotally see Asterisk in use far more commonly, and I think that's also where Asterisk is applied in other applications or products, like for example Switchvox that we make at Digium. That's a really good fit for those small to medium businesses. But it is in the enterprise, and I'm sure you guys know that, and that it's used under the hood, at least for certain features, by a number of ITSPs and other service providers. And it's used in a lot of call centers, so including some rather large call centers. So Asterisk fits in everywhere, and so I immediately contradict myself on the first slide because we say it's a fully featured open source PBX, but of course Asterisk really isn't a PBX. It's nothing out of the box. It really is just a framework, a toolkit for you to be able to build or extend PBX or other telephony, unified communication functionality. And we're going to look at a few examples of that, how you can extend the life of your existing PBX, adding feature capability with Asterisk. For example, if you've got a PBX that is a little bit out of date, a legacy PBX that can't use SIP, for example, then you can, connect that box to a new Asterisk installation, via traditional connection, like a channelized T1, and then use the Asterisk box for the outbound SIP connection. So, who are Digium? We are Digium. Any other Digimites in the room? I saw some earlier. No? So that's it. I forgot to introduce myself earlier. Whoops, sorry. I'm not used to using a microphone. I normally just yell. My name's Derek Peliquin, and I am the senior trainer at Digium. We've got just a 4-person training staff. Our training manager, Kenny Schumard, who is going to be running in and out of the room, I think, all day, bouncing between here and the DCAP room. You're not familiar with that. That's the Digium Certified Asterisk Professional certification. And we have a few open slots, so if you haven't already registered for that and you think that might be useful, especially if you're an Asterisk consultant or reseller, that's an awesome certification to have. And you can sign up and take the test here. It's a fun test. It's 3 hours of half written test and half practical. It's a pretty professional grade test, and it's an experience. So anyone here take the DCAP test or have the DCAP certification? Yeah, boy, yeah. You have the DCAP too, of course, right? Yeah, you took that in Huntsville, right? All right, good deal. I digress. I was introducing myself. I've been with Digium like 6 years next month, and I actually joined Digium pretty much right out of school. So Digium and Asterisk have been my career, really. Started in tech support, as about a third of the company seems to have done, and moved on, and I was providing technical support for pretty much all of Asterisk products that we have at Digium, the software add-on products, our hardware interface cards, and also the Switchvox series of appliances, and then providing training as well. So for a couple years, I was doing training courses off and on and assisting Jared Smith, who y'all might be familiar with, was the training manager at Digium for some time. He co-authored the first two volumes of the Asterisk book from O'Reilly Press, then called the Future of Telephony. Now the third volume is out. It came out this spring, and it's against version 1.8. If you don't have that, you might want to check it out. It's updated, and it's got a lot more content than the second volume, and it is no longer called the Future of Telephony because the future is now, right? It's the definitive guide. Anyways, Sean, I think, has been with Digium longer than I have, and been in a number of roles. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Everyone can hear me. My name is Sean Pimentel. I'm an instructor here at Digium as well. I've been doing instructor-led classes for a little over a year now. I've been with Digium for roughly 6 years. It's a little over that, so it's right before Digium or Derek started. Had humble beginnings, started shipping boxes for Digium. Didn't really know much about Linux or Asterisk. A training class did not exist when I started at Digium. Slowly just built myself a bit of experience using Linux and Asterisk. Long nights in the office teaching myself, and slowly moved from shipping to testing cards to testing software, and then on to teaching classes. So I'm here observing the Asterisk 1, 2, 3, and if y'all have any questions, you can ask me. It's no problem.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of an anecdote, actually. Back in the day, especially, we didn't have any internal training, getting new hires up to speed. And, it was very difficult, especially, several years back, to hire right off the street someone who was familiar with or an expert in Asterisk. So we'd take people in as long as they knew a little bit about Linux and, just throw people into the fire, basically. What we'd like to do, almost as like a hazing ritual, would be to get people taking calls their first day without even knowing Asterisk, just throw them in the fire, which they did to me. In fact, for the first 3 months at Digium, as a tech support person, so on the phone all day long, I had a phone exactly like this one, so I'd be taking calls like this all day. It was real fun. And I kept that phone because we have a good relationship. But like the first week I was at Digium, I got sent to Kansas City, and I took what was called the 5-day Asterisk boot camp from Steve Sokol and Associates, and that was my Asterisk training, and went from there. So that was fun, going from nothing to taking the DCAP test. That was a grueling week. Anyways, Digium is headquartered in sunny Hunts Vegas, Alabama. Anyone been to Huntsville? Huntsville is a pretty cool place. Everyone seems quite surprised when they show up, and it's not just a big cow pasture. Huntsville has, I think, the most engineers per capita than anywhere in the United States. We got NASA and all the defense contractors and other contractors related to NASA there, and a large research park, and Marshall Space Flight Center and everything. So a lot of rocket testing and stuff going on at the Redstone Arsenal, which is right next door practically to Digium. Cassius, do you remember, did you hear the rocket test going on when we were having lunch? Yeah, like all day long you hear blah, blah, just blowing off. And so, yeah, Rocket City is what they call it. So we also have a new facility for the Switchvox folks over in San Diego, California. So that's where all the development and support and everything else related to Switchvox happens. But I know you're probably familiar with us. Digium is the Asterisk company, and we try and do all things Asterisk. We support the Asterisk project, and we provide a staff of probably 15-ish, maybe even more. I think maybe like 20 developers now who full-time just work on the Open Source Asterisk project. And then we, of course, make and sell stuff related to Asterisk. And we have hardware termination cards, T1 cards, analog cards, codec translation hardware, and of course training and support. So real brief, I'll tell you about our training products. We have a 3-day training course called the Fast Start course, which is not like a crash course in Asterisk. It's just an abridged version of training where, like I said, you get sort of go from nothing to being able to set up a real basic SMB PBX. And then the 5-day course, the Asterisk Advanced class, we've designed to kind of pick up from there. So you can think of it as a series of courses where we do a review of what was covered in the previous Fast Start course, and then jump into more advanced Asterisk concepts. So if you guys would be interested in training on like AGI or the real-time architecture in Asterisk, fax-related things, what else do we do? We talk about FuncODBC and just everything else that we, Dundee, all the other advanced technologies, AMI, AGI. We do a couple of cool AGI labs where we use AGI with Twitter. Everyone seems to enjoy that. And then, of course, we just recently came out with the Asterisk Essentials online training. So again, if any of this piques your interest in Asterisk, I would definitely suggest the online training because you don't have to fly to Huntsville or anywhere else to take it, and it's just a couple $100 versus a couple thousand for the instructor-led classes. But for those who don't know, I will give you a little bit of history of the founding of Digium. It's actually kind of interesting. Mark Spencer had a Linux support services company back in the early 90s, or the late 90s before the dot-com bubble burst. And he was doing this out of his dorm room at Auburn. And all he was doing is it was like a brokerage service where basically he had a network of, Asterisk, or not Asterisk, but Linux experts, different developers and subject matter experts where a person would come in with a problem or a request for some custom development or even just a full application. And Mark would get them in touch with the right person, basically. And very quickly, it became obvious that it was cumbersome to do this, essentially by hand, and he needed a phone system. I think he got some seed money from Adtran to start this business, and I think he had a couple of grand. I forget how much exactly, but he was pricing out, some basic, small legacy PBXs. And was astonished at the price. And I remember him saying, he came and visited one of our classes and said, if he had purchased the cheapest one that he could use that would meet his needs, it would leave $6 in the bank for the company. So, and if anyone knows Mark, he's not just brilliant, but he's also a pretty frugal guy. He said, screw that, and he decided to write his own PBX. And legend has it, I think he wrote the alpha version of Asterisk that he would then later rewrite in just like 2.5 weeks, some rather short period of time. And Asterisk was its own project that was just up on asterisk.org. And he had a couple other projects that he thought would be much more popular, like the Keops network discovery protocol that was really cool at the time. And no one seemed interested in that, and he actually had people coming and adding patches and expressing interest in Asterisk. It's kind of counterintuitive, like there's nothing really sexy about a phone system. But because there was the bubble burst in Linux support systems, customer base seemed to dry up overnight, and there was all of a sudden this interest peaking in the Asterisk thing. We decided that would be what we switched the company focus to, renamed the company to Digium, and here we are. If you're curious, the name Digium actually apparently comes from one of the friends of Mark was unable to pronounce the word paradigm. He pronounced it paradigium, and that got thrown up on the whiteboard of names to maybe name the company. Got chopped down to Digium, and everyone got a vote. Everyone had veto rights. I think the company was like 9 people at the time, and it was the only name that no one hated. And quick Google search found out that it wasn't like a curse word in any language, wasn't trademarked. So there you go, we're Digium. So like I said, Digium today, we sponsor the Asterisk community as best we can. We try and provide a number of developers full-time to just continuing to build it and enhance Asterisk proper, and now the Asterisk SCF project, which there's be some news today about, I understand. And of course, we're an open source business. We have the business side of things that we sell our own software licenses, hardware, the Switchvox appliances. And then we have a rather dense business ecosystem of distributors and resellers, and those resellers are our sort of connection to the community, the business community, where some of you in the room might be some of our select resellers or other levels of reseller where we will send customers to if they need sort of local support or local integration support or other assistance, the value add that those resellers provide in I think over 50% of our sales now are international. And this is actually out of date. I think we're probably more like 160, 170 employees and continuing to grow. That's always good, especially in this economy, right? It's difficult to estimate or otherwise, identify how many Asterisk installations there are out there, because as you guys likely know, Asterisk can be under the hood in a number of different applications, including some that where they're OEMing the business license of Asterisk from Digium, Digium owning the copyright to Asterisk, being the creator of Asterisk. We can do that, so there are places where it's undisclosed that Asterisk is in very large installations, and then Asterisk is installed in a number of appliances, software appliances or package builds of Asterisk. Anyone use like PBX in a flash? Trixbox? Yeah, a lot of Trixbox users. Asterisk Now? Oh, no one? Okay. Asterisk Now is another project that Digium sponsors, and it's sort of the slimmed down version of a lot of the package builds of Asterisk you might be familiar with, where you've got a base Linux installation, of course, Asterisk, one of a couple of GUIs, and then all sorts of other stuff you can throw in on top to make the admin experience, making ads, moves, and changes, queue metrics, and that kind of thing. Asterisk Now is just CentOS Asterisk, and then you can choose either to install the Asterisk GUI, which is the GUI that comes with the Business Edition or OEM version of Asterisk, and it's also available under the Asterisk project. You can download it from asterisk.org, and it's very simple. I think it's slowly still being developed by a couple of people, but it's really slimmed down for essentially making ads, moves, and changes, and that's kind of it. In contrast, the free PBX GUI is its own community. And any free PBX users or developers here? Yeah, right on. And that's an option again with Asterisk Now, and has been for some time. So you've got those package builds of Asterisk being downloaded through repositories for a number of Linux distributions. So it's difficult or actually impossible to quantify how much market share or saturation Asterisk has. I think in 2008, maybe 2009, there was some study done on that, and I think there's a white paper on our website that details some of that. And so definitely over 2 million Asterisk servers in production. I think it was at 2 million in about 2009. So quite a bit more out there today, and it looked like there weren't that many neophytes in the room, so I suspect everyone's familiar with the definition of PBX. If not, there you go. It's a private branch exchange. It's sort of a local switch on the customer premises or the business premises that provides a couple of important things, and traditionally that would be bridging asymmetrical resources where you've got maybe 20 internal phones, but it's a small home office type installation or business. So you've got a couple of incoming analog lines, and that way you can bridge incoming calls on those lines to the internal users instead of having just incoming lines hooked up to regular phones and only getting services from the provider. And so that machine would also provide feature set, and that of course will differ from PBX to PBX, but features of course you're likely all quite familiar with, like voicemail, conferencing, maybe video conferencing, etc. And there's an interesting confluence going on now, and has been for some time, and this I think is very it's brought to light in our instructor-led classes. It's always very interesting, and it's quite fun. We have people coming from an IT background where they've never messed with any telecom technology. They don't know anything about ISDN or Q931, but now they have this IP PBX, and since they're the IT guy, they have to maintain it. So they come and get a crash course on Asterisk and have to learn all of the relevant technologies that they've always shunned. I'm not the phone guy. And then the phone guys, coming from a background, they know H323, MGCP, ISDN, SS7, and now they have to learn all this IP stuff. And so in every class, it's like that. Everyone is coming from a different background of experience, and after about 20 minutes of getting to know each other, we jump into labs. Every 45 minutes, we're doing a lab, and everyone's kind of helping each other out, sharing their experience, and everyone's trying to pick up something else because, as you likely understand, the PBX or an Asterisk PBX is just a PC, just a Dell server, or like I don't know if y'all can see this busted old Dell we have here that I'm hosting my Asterisk box. I think it's an old Celeron, and that's how it is. I mean, you can leverage existing resources to maybe a decommissioned server, throw Asterisks on there, open source, use SIP trunks, like to an ITSP, and SIP endpoints to the desktop, like a free soft phone such as Zoiper, Akiga, Xlite, and you're good to go. So the modern PBX is just another server, just another VM instance in your existing infrastructure. And of course, back in the day, what a big, ugly piece of steel. We're going to move on and talk about the different applications of Asterisk, because I said Asterisk really is telephony toolkit, and there are myriad examples in the room, I'm sure, of how we're all using Asterisk. And we'll talk about Asterisk as the program, toolkit, a platform, the product of Asterisk, so like Business Edition and other products based on Asterisk, like Switchvox, and then the community. That's the open source community, as well as the business ecosystem. So, Asterisk itself, out of the box, like I said, is nothing but a toolkit. There's no functionality really provided. If you do install the default sample config files, you would have a default dial plan and EEX trunk. EEX is how you pronounce IAX, the Inter-Asterisk Exchange Protocol, the protocol built by Mark for essentially trunking Asterisk boxes together. But as you guys probably know, and we probably have some ITSPs in the room, there are a number that provide EEX trunks to the cloud as well, which can be useful, especially if you've got a large number of calls, and you can enable the trunking option in EEX that'll share the payload and reduce overall bandwidth usage. And anyone actually set up Asterisk for the first time, maybe playing with it at home or sandboxing it at work, and use the default dial plan and call Digium? No? No one do that? Yeah, okay. And were you surprised to get someone on the other end? Oh, okay. Yeah, the default dial plan has a number of prompts recorded by Allison Smith, the voice of Asterisk, who I think comes to every Astricon, so hopefully she'll be here. And, or is she here now? I don't know. No. And it explains that, you can do this, and you can dial this extension, like 500, I think, a demo extension, and it will bridge a call to what was called Misery, our phone system at Digium. Aptly named back in the day when I started. Oops, I apologize. If you're familiar with the development cycle for Asterisk, we use the Subversion revision control system, and in Subversion, the name for the active development code base is the development trunk, and a daily checkout of trunk. So the working version of Asterisk as is would be what we'd be testing on our live PBX. So that would often be very interesting. Any given day, our PBX, and we're a PBX company, might not be working, so that was fun. Asterisk out of the box, like I said, can provide some limited functionality, and even to this day, people in sales, people in support get random calls from people who are very surprised and kind of stutter and then hang up the phone. It sounds like prank calls, but it's all these people calling in after they've set up their Asterisk system for the first time. And I would get calls like that at 2 a.m., people all excited. I'm like, man, congratulations, like, hey. One important note, and this is often surprising to people who are researching Asterisk and might try and integrate it into their solution, is Asterisk is not a SIP proxy. If you're looking for a proxy or proxy type capability, you need to look at another open source solution like a SIR, a Camelio, a SIP Express router. Asterisk is a back-to-back user agent, so it's a client and a server at the same time. So we'll look at basic Asterisk call flow, I think, pretty shortly, and we'll see kind of how that applies, and it'll make it a little bit more sense if you're not familiar with SIP or what a user agent or a UAS or UAC really is. The diagram will kind of help explain that. But otherwise, Asterisk provides all the typical PBX feature functionality that you would expect in a PBX, right? So a number of different protocols, and of course all the features such as conferencing, queue capability, ACD, being IVR functionality, etc. And Asterisk as a toolkit, basically, and I've seen this a number of times. In fact, typically when I'm doing an on-site class where a company is using Asterisk or starting to use Asterisk for the first time, they might be developing one particular module for Asterisk, and we're going to look at the modular architecture of Asterisk very shortly. And they're just using it for one piece of the puzzle. Their solution is their own call center or CMS kind of solution, and they're just using Asterisk as one piece of the puzzle. And Asterisk, kind of going up one layer as an application, can be a platform where essentially you're using an existing module of Asterisk, one particular feature to extend your existing architecture. So if your PBX, is a licensed model where you have to pay X amount of dollars per user for a conference bridge, or to extend the capability to use a particular protocol, you have to pay a couple $100. You can instead, throw up an Asterisk box on a Dell machine, and you have got full capability. As far as the resources, the hardware resources can handle, that's one of the interesting things about Asterisk is now you have there's a little bit of a learning curve where you're going to have to figure out, there's no limit on how many users you can have in a conference. It's all about how much the hardware resources can handle, how many calls the machine is capable of based on how much CPU power you have and RAM, and of course other things involved like what codecs you're using. The codec translation, depending on codec A to B, can be rather costly, especially if you're using a codec like G729. So that's one of the first woes people experience as they enter the Asterisk world. And one of the most common questions I have in a class, and maybe someone in the room has the same question, how do I know how to, what server to buy for my Asterisk installation? I'm going to have queuing, I'm going to do call recording, codec translation, how much RAM do I need? And there's no simple answer. There's no matrix you can go look at online to figure that out. And it's, like I said, it's a lot easier when you can just pay for X amount of channels or X amount of user licenses in another PBX. So there's a little bit of a give and take there, but usually it's worth it, especially when it's free, right? Asterisk itself as a product does exist. There is a commercial license of Asterisk, and that's kind of taken many forms. It used to be called Asterisk Business Edition, and you could buy it like a box just like you see there, where it comes with support and upgrade and technical support as well as bug support. And this is often used in a lot of embedded solutions. In fact, anyone familiar with the AA50 appliance that we have, that little tiny embedded guy? Or do you use the AA50 or? Okay, all right. Yeah, for like the 10 user type installations, it's definitely a pretty good choice. And that uses Business Edition Asterisk. If you connect to the CLI, you'll see that it should say Asterisk Business Edition. And it's also what's under the hood, I think, in our Switchvox appliance. So it's still out there, but usually it's not, well, it's essentially used for OEM purposes. So if a company would like to license Asterisk to use without providing the source along with their product, then the commercial version is right for them. Otherwise, of course, there's the Asterisk project proper, which you can get all the information on asterisk.org. Then there's a number of mailing lists there and other resources that I would, if you haven't actually checked out asterisk.org, you should give it a look. I think this is out of date. There are more sort of core developers. The Asterisk project is essentially what's called a meritocracy, where those who contribute, provide patches or other assistance to the community, like bug marshaling on the bug tracker. After kind of proving themselves and making sure that they know what they're doing and they understand the code guidelines and everything for developing Asterisk, then they can get commit access proper, where they can directly add in code to the Asterisk code base. And so there are constantly, people joining the community and becoming sort of the core developer crowd. And again, a number of those developers are paid in full-time from Digium. And then again, there's a lot of people who are contributing in other ways. Sometimes it just comes full circle where a company develops or extends a module in Asterisk, and then submits that code to the community so everyone else can use that. And then other people who just test the new versions of Asterisk. If there's a release candidate or a beta version available, run it on their sandbox at their company, and make sure that there's no obvious problems, and that's a significant contribution in itself. And then minor code contributions, minor patches, sort of custodial contributions. So there's a lot of different ways that people can contribute. As I mentioned, on the website, you can see there's a number of mailing lists, and if you haven't subscribed to some of those, I'd recommend doing so. It's a pretty valuable resource for the Asterisk users mailing list. It's a great place to send your questions if you don't have a support subscription or any other kind of access to commercial support. The community at large can often help you. In fact, really the first resource, no joke, Google. Often, if there's a particular error that you're experiencing, or perhaps what you suspect to be a bug, Google it, and sort of at the top will be some post on the mailing list or the bug tracker, and you can kind of follow it from there to find the resolution. But the Asterisk security mailing list as well, I would definitely suggest if you guys are using Asterisk and it's part of your core business in particular, stay aware of any security updates and releases. I think there was one. Wasn't it last week, the 1871? Okay. Yeah, and I had to go update my personal Asterisk box because there was some SIP vulnerability that was pretty significant. So keep aware of, of course, if you're running a Linux machine, stay up to date as far as updates for your whatever platform you're running as well. And of course, the Asterisk IRC chat channel is well populated. A lot of the developers, in fact, almost all of them, it seems like, hang out there. So if you have a question, you can try asking in an IRC, and usually you can get help. And then, of course, if all else fails, you can get commercial support from a number of different places. Your reseller, and we have support subscriptions at Digium as well. And there's a number of different tiers in those subscriptions, so you can get like 24/7 unlimited support, unlimited incidences, unlimited servers, and just a note, if you're interested in subscriptions for support, I believe at least the top two, like the level 3 and the level 4 subscriptions, will give you I think a 50% discount on training. So you can come hang out with me and Sean in Huntsville. I know that's a big perk. Of course, there's astricon.net. Have you guys checked out astricon.net? No? If you look at astricon.net, if you miss a particular talk, if there's a scheduling conflict for you and you can't go to a particular talk because you're going to another one, or if you want to check out what talks there were last year, there's an archive of all the videos. In fact, this is being recorded and will be up at some point, so you can listen to me again. And I think that's the case for all of the talks. So if you miss something, you can go check it out later, including the keynotes. So there are blogs at digium.com that are pretty valuable. I think actually there are a number of announcements that we make on different products, as well as new features and cool stuff in Asterisk open source proper that are posted on the blog. So kind of watch that. So the Asterisk business ecosystem is sort of built by a chain of distributors and resellers that, especially value-added resellers that are integrators, and I know a number of you are integrators that provide Asterisk installation and continuing support and things like that. But of course, there's a number of Asterisk consultants that you can do one-off code changes or fix a bounty if there's a particular bug or feature that someone's looking for, and custom-built PBX, turnkey solutions, that kind of thing. And that, again, if there's any consultants in here, if you're interested in taking the DCAP test, I'd highly recommend it. Usually seems to get a foot in the door as far as Asterisk work if you're a DCAP. I see a lot of job postings online looking for Asterisk work, and the job posting requests specifically a DCAP to do that. So that's definitely a particular value in the Asterisk niche. And then, of course, there are a number of vendors who provide Asterisk-based equipment and telephony cards and appliances built on Asterisk. So kind of preaching to the choir there. I know pretty much everyone in this room has got some sort of business built around Asterisk, apparently. So anyone, I didn't ask this earlier when we were kind of showing hands who does what. Anyone here a contributor to the community? Do you provide patches or Asterisk code? Got one here. Mark back there, yeah. So, all right, so this is an important topic and something that we have to kind of set straight, especially in our fast start class when we do this, what Asterisk ain't. It's definitely not a VoIP provider in a box. I think that's still to this day the most common question we get at Digium, whether it's in sales or support. And you got a call in the training queue, I think on Friday before we left, how do I be a Vonage, basically? And yeah, that's really common, but really not something that you can just do out of the box with Asterisk. Asterisk is not an ITSP. It's going to be one piece of a rather large stack to get that going. So again, it's really not anything out of the box. It's just a toolkit, and it's not, again, I said proxy. It is, as I mentioned earlier, a back-to-back user agent. And it's not as hard as it looks. There is still, even now, sort of a learning curve, I guess, and intimidation factor associated with Asterisk, but it's really not that difficult. The Asterisk resources available online, the online documentation, resources like the IRC channel, and the existing book in particular, the definitive guide, make it pretty easy. Again, kind of preaching to the choir here, why use open source software? There's a number of reasons, and they all seem sort of self-explanatory. Up front, and one of the reasons most people seem to choose it when I'm talking to them in class is because of cost. Especially nowadays after the economy took a dive, a lot of the people I'm interacting with, they're dumping their existing system because it costs too much to support. There's thousands of dollars they have to pay in licensing fees and support fees to maintain their equipment, and it just is unwieldy and not cost effective. So, again, take some servers you already have, decommission for another purpose, throw Asterisk on there, and you're halfway there. There's that sort of initial cost and investment up front, perhaps, to get someone in the internal infrastructure, to be able to use and configure asterisks, but that's sometimes just a pretty small hurdle. Otherwise, it could be any number of reasons. You might be just a purist and absolutely insist on open source. And isn't it true, Mark, that someone was talking about putting Exchange in at Digium, and you said you're going to walk out if that was the case?
I said they could either have Exchange or they can't be.
There you go. So, and of course, just for hobbying purposes, again, like usually those who are, in fact, that's everyone in our classes, they're here for a business purpose. Either they've been tasked with taking over an existing asterisk box, or they're, again, replacing a legacy system, and they're really not excited to be there, and about 20 minutes into it, they're super excited because they're realizing all the ways that they can have fun with asterisks, like, again, spoofing their caller ID, pranking their friends. And I think you would often say, Mark, it's hard to get people, what was the quote? It's difficult to get people excited about phones, but when they do, they get really excited.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's hard to get most people excited about phones, but when you get excited about phones, they get very excited.
And, I didn't believe you at first, because I didn't. I was like, this sucks. But, but like I said, when I jumped into that, to my asterisk experience, it was getting thrown into the fire. So that was quite fun in retrospect. But yeah, everyone gets really, really amped about the ways that they can mess with people. And I don't know what that says about humanity in general, but that's always the way that people get excited about asterisks. Sorry, in my experience. So. I think everyone, of course, is familiar with open source licensing and the GPL. Anyone not know what the GPL is? No. So there are, really we're going to look at two different ways. I think it shows it here. Yeah, I guess, well, actually two ways that Digium, or rather Asterisk is licensed. There is the open source version of Asterisk, that's a GPL, I think still a GPL version 2, although the current version of GPL is version 3, if I'm not mistaken. And then what was blanket referred to as Asterisk Business Edition, now just, I think, commercial Asterisks, I think we just changed it, is what we use for OEM purposes. So because Mark wrote Asterisk and we, Digium, have the copyright to Asterisk, we can license it OEM to different service providers, et cetera, or otherwise people who are building a product based on Asterisk where they're maybe highly modifying it and do not wish to release the code, so don't want to share it with the community, I guess. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. With regards to the ability to contribute code, and as I said, those who get commit access, there's a sort of a small core group of people with access. And I was speculating earlier, Mark, it's probably, these slides are a little bit out of date. Do you know how many people have actual commit access now? No? Yeah, right on, sorry. Not going to shunt all the questions to you. I just, and then of course there's a number of people, perhaps hundreds, who are providing patches all the time. A lot of times, it seems like a significant portion of the time, if you're looking at bugs in the bug tracker, someone who submits a bug, they might actually provide the patch to fix it as well. It's just, hey, here you go, throw this code in, and that'll fix that little problem. So. There's a lot of people who contribute to Asterisk. And again, it can come full circle where a number of times I've seen people extend Asterisk for their particular purposes and then give that back to the community. And if you do provide code to Asterisk, I think you maintain the copyright, but sign away, you have to sign a waiver still. I think the license, and I think you have to fax it, right? I mean, actually. Oh, click, okay, VeriSign or whatever, okay. So you sign the license, but you maintain the copyright. And, Of course, there's no requirement to do that. If you do make modifications to Asterisk and are using that in your own installation, that's fine. Of course, if it's a product, it would be against the GPL to distribute it without distributing the source code. So I've actually had to have conversations with some folks in our training class who were using Asterisk in a product and not releasing the code, and I don't think they were aware of it. So we kind of sat down and explained, the caveats of the GPL and how to provide the code so that they weren't in violation of that. But where is Asterisk used? Asterisk, of course, is used in a number of places. This is kind of awful clip art, but this is valid. Asterisk, of course, can be installed in a number of embedded applications, and there are people who have installed, embedded Linux on WRT routers and installed Asterisk on that, make a call or two. And the next few slides are just essentially just basic topology view of ways you can use and install Asterisk. Pretty straightforward stuff, but sometimes it really kind of actually opens people's eyes. We were doing a class last week, and we were explaining this, how to do a VoIP-only installation with Asterisk, and we were blowing this guy's mind. He was so excited about how he didn't have to use any hardware or pay for any phones and that kind of thing, and just use a real cheap ITSP for his home business. Of course, you can throw in an Asterisk box to replace a traditional PBX, and especially with the Digium hardware interface cards, you can terminate T1, E1, J1, analog, any of your existing connections. And of course, the hardware that we provide at Digium, there's a variety of densities. We've got 4-port to 24-port analog cards. 24-port card is kind of just like a channel bank in a box. And so you can terminate the existing endpoints internally if you've got a bunch of old analog phones that you want to continue using. Kind of hook them right up to the PC like I have here. Got I think a 4-port analog card with a phone up to it, I think. Yeah, we're getting dial tone. And then you can connect to whatever existing connection to the PSTN. So if you've got, a CAS T1, E&M, whatever you have currently, you can hook up with Asterisk. And Asterisk, there's even a channel driver for SS7, MFC R2. So pretty much any protocol that you might need to use, Asterisk can do it. So there's a little bit of upfront cost there, if you got to find a machine to put those cards in, and then getting the card themselves. With the VoIP-only PBX installation, like I said, you can just get a VPS service online, pay a couple bucks a month for a slice, or leverage an existing installation, or just create a VM and install Open Source Asterisk for free. Use free soft phones, like I said, Akiga, Zoiper. What else? Xlite. Of course, if you're using Linux, I think Xlite, the Xlite client hasn't been updated in a while, so it's kind of buggy, so you might want to avoid that. And there's a number of very cheap ITSPs. I personally use Vitality for my personal box, and again, I prefer that provider among others because it provides EEX capability as well. I'm a big fan of EEX. So because Asterisk can handle any number of VoIP and traditional telephony protocols out of the box, you can, of course, create a hybrid PBX, and that's what we kind of have here. We've got a Polycom, I think, VoIP SIP phone and an analog phone here, and so this can be pretty useful if you have an existing installation that you're going to replace with Asterisk. Terminate, your existing analog lines, and then, hook up to an ITSP. Maybe send your long-distance calls over the internet to save some money. So you can use it as a VoIP gateway for a legacy PBX. You can see I don't have a laser pointer, but the box here on the right, maybe an existing PBX on one site, and you put Asterisk in front of it. As I mentioned earlier, the legacy PBX can't support any thank you. Any VoIP capability, you can hook up the Asterisk box with maybe just a channelized T1, and then you SIP to the internet over an ITSP connection to terminate, long distance calls and again save your company some money. And finally, Asterisk as a feature server, if you don't want to pay the extra grand to add X amount of conference room members to your existing PBX, this is where, again, and anecdotally, in the classes that we offer people, they're coming for this particular reason. They don't want to pay any more for adding features to their existing PBX, and they're just going to hook up Asterisk and use it as a voicemail server, et cetera. I know we have a lot of Asterisk professionals here, but I forgot to ask earlier, with a show of hands, who is using Asterisk as their core PBX for their business phone system? Yeah, I'd like to see that. Who's using Asterisk to extend an existing PBX, but they actually have their legacy PBX still in place? Okay, and phasing that out, or just, yeah, okay. So that's, like I said, that 60% of every class we teach, people are just, they're getting rid of their old phone system, which is always exciting to see the continued adoption and the disruptive nature of Asterisk. But I mentioned earlier, and again, this is the crowd that is most familiar with the other unique ways that Asterisk can be used, and of course, there's always talks here at AstriCon that show the more exotic ways Asterisk can be implemented. I think one of the common ones that Mark mentions, and I always bring up at class, is botanicals. I think that was shown off at AstriCon a few years ago, but botanicals is that project where I think it's got like a hydrometer and other interfaces with where you can plug in to like a plant, like a flower pot, sorry, and it can tell you or call you or tweet you and tell you that it needs water or that it's happy because it was watered and that kind of thing. And that's pretty cool. That's the kind of thing that I'm sure when you created Asterisk didn't think that people would be doing that. I mean, who would think that? Asterisk or a phone system in general, again, is not something that's traditional thought of as being very exciting or sexy, but there's all sorts of crazy and very interesting things that people are doing with Asterisk. But all of the above applies as well. So beyond the SMB PBX, Asterisk is in very large enterprise installations. Asterisk is installed in a number of municipalities. Just every phone that they're using is hooked up to Asterisk. A number of large university installations, large call centers are using Asterisk, and it has built in a lot of capability for ACD and queuing, and a lot of our resellers and integrators provide an extra layer on top of that for queue metrics and things like that. So.